she married a poor farmer with nothing but love in her heart, only for him to rise, betray her, and throw her out like trash. But years later, when he lay dying and desperate, the healer he begged for was the same woman he once destroyed. Zuena and Olamo's love began like a fairy tale in the heart of Nguta village. It all started during the Harvest Moon Festival, a time when the whole village gathered to sing, dance, and give thanks to the gods for their blessings. That night, as flames from the ceremonial fire lit up the sky, Zuena and Olamo saw each other for the first time. Their eyes met across the crowd, and something magical happened, as if the spirits of their ancestors whispered that they were meant to be. In that moment, two hearts connected, and neither of them would ever be the same again. Soon after, their love blossomed into something real and deep. Olamo, admired for his charm and rising status, chose Zuena, a girl from humble beginnings, as his bride. It shocked some, impressed others, but most agreed they were a perfect match. Their wedding was one of the grandest Nguta had ever seen. Drums echoed through the hills, the women danced in circles, and the elders poured blessings on the young couple. People smiled and said, "These two will go far." Even though Zuena came from a poor family, she carried herself with the quiet grace of a queen. She didn't need riches to shine. Her kindness, her patience, and her unwavering support for Olamo were worth more than gold. She believed in his dreams more than anyone else. While he chased his ambitions, she made their small house a home. She cooked, cleaned, and even cared for his aging mother without complaint. She never asked for more, never compared herself to anyone, and never made Olamo feel pressured. She gave her heart fully. At first, Olamo cherished Zuena deeply. He often said, "I'm nothing without her." They laughed, danced in the rain, and dreamed about the future. They were the couple everyone looked up to, the picture of love and teamwork. But sometimes life has its own plans, and little did they know, the sweet beginning of their love story was only the calm before the storm. The same village that once celebrated their union would one day witness its painful fall, and Zuena, the woman who gave her all, would soon face the test of a lifetime. This was the beginning of something beautiful and something tragic, because in the land of Nguta, where blessings flowed and curses slept in shadows, destiny was always watching. And when a heart is broken without reason, the land remembers. When Olamo faced tough times and money became scarce, it was Zuena who stood like a rock beside him. Without telling anyone, she took out her mother's most treasured possession, a string of blue beads passed down through generations, and sold them just to raise enough money for Olamo's job interviews and travel. Those beads were the last thing her mother left her, but Zuena gave them up without hesitation, believing that Olamo's success would be their future. Rain or shine, Zuena did everything to keep their small home running. When the gas ran out, she cooked with firewood, even during heavy storms, shielding the pot with her own body to keep the flames alive. When their well dried up, she walked long distances to fetch water, sometimes before dawn, sometimes late at night. And when their food was almost gone, she quietly borrowed maize from their neighbor, promising herself she'd return it soon. She did all this so Olamo would never return home to an empty plate or a troubled heart. But the most painful sacrifice wasn't physical, it was emotional. When Olamo finally got the city job he dreamed of, it meant moving far away. But Zuena didn't follow. Instead, she stayed behind to care for his aging mother, Mama Ekene, who had never truly accepted her. Mama Ekene often reminded Zuena that she wasn't good enough for her son, whispering insults and throwing harsh looks her way. Yet Zuena endured it all. She bathed the old woman, fed her, and sat by her side when she was sick. She did it out of love, not for herself, but for Olamo. Through it all, Zuena never raised her voice, never complained, never made Olamo feel guilty. When he called from the city, she only spoke of good things, how the flowers were blooming, how his mother was doing better, how proud she was of him. She never told him about the hunger, the cold, or the pain she silently carried. Every night, she would sit by the fire, staring at the sky, whispering prayers for Olamo's success. And even when the days were long and the nights lonely, she smiled. She believed that love meant sacrifice, and she gave hers completely, without expecting anything in return. But destiny watches, and sometimes, when a heart gives too much and receives nothing back, the universe stirs. Zulena's quiet sacrifices were not forgotten, not by the winds, not by the earth, and not by fate itself. City life began to shape Olamo into someone Zuena no longer recognized. At first, it was small things, The way he dressed, the way he spoke, how he walked like the ground owed him something. He wore polished shoes now, ironed shirts with golden buttons, and carried a phone that never seemed to ring for her. The humble boy who once held Zulena's hand under the moonlight was disappearing, slowly swallowed by the glitter of the city. And with every visit back to Nguta, the distance between their hearts grew wider. Olamo no longer looked at Zulena with warmth in his eyes. He would come back smelling of perfumes that were not hers, foreign scents that clung to his shirts and whispered secrets of another woman's touch. He would brush her questions aside with lazy laughter and say, "You're being too sensitive, Zulena." His voice, once full of love and respect, now dripped with arrogance. He no longer saw her as the woman who stood by him through hunger and rain. To him, she was now just a reminder of a life he had outgrown. Zulena wrote letters every week, pouring her heart into every word, telling him about Mama Akin's health, the new yams she planted, the lonely nights. But her letters remained unopened, collecting dust in his city apartment. When she called, he barely picked up, and when he did, it was short, cold, distracted. "I'm busy," he would say. "I'll call you back." But he never did. His world had no space for Zulena anymore. The villagers began to whisper. They saw the change. They saw how Olamo walked past Zulena in the market without even a smile, how he spoke to her like she was just another face in the crowd. They saw the signs she tried to hide, the forced smiles, the silent tears. And still, Zulena hoped. Still, she waited. Still, she prayed that maybe, just maybe, the man she loved was still somewhere inside this stranger. But Olamo's heart had grown cold. The city had fed his pride and inflated his ego. He began to think that Zulena, with her simple clothes and calloused hands, no longer fit into the polished life he was building. He forgot the nights she stayed hungry so he could eat. He forgot the beads she sold, the miles she walked, the pain she endured. In his mind, she was no longer enough. And so, the seed of ego took root in Olamo's heart, slowly choking the love that once grew so strong between them. The man who once promised forever was now a stranger lost in his own reflection. And Zulena, still holding on, had no idea that destiny was already writing a different ending for them both. In the fast lights of the city, Olamo crossed paths with Adiza, a woman who wore beauty like armor and charm like a weapon. She was nothing like Zulena. Her voice was coated in honey, but her heart was sharp as broken glass. She had long eyelashes that fluttered like wings and red lips that never spoke without purpose. And she knew exactly what she wanted, Olamo, not for love, but for status, money, and the thrill of taking what wasn't hers. Adiza laughed when she heard about Zulena. "A village girl?" she sneered, curling her lips. "You mean the one who still pounds yam with her bare hands and wears wrappers from the market?" She painted Zulena as a joke, a shadow of the life Olamo now lived. "You need a woman who fits this new world," Adiza whispered into his ears. "A woman like me." Olamo, already puffed up with ego and blind with desire, listened. Slowly, her poison worked. The memories of Zulena's sacrifices faded. He began to feel ashamed of her, the very woman who had carried him through storms. He began to believe that love needed glamour, not loyalty. He confused true beauty with polished nails and expensive perfumes. He forgot the smell of firewood meals, the warmth of Zulena's quiet prayers, and the love in her eyes that once lifted him up. Adiza played her role like a queen. She called herself his real partner, told him to break free from his past, and Olamo obeyed. When he next returned to Nguta, he didn't bring gifts or kind words. He brought silence and scorn. Zulena ran to meet him, her heart full of hope, her hands trembling with joy. But the look in his eyes froze her soul. There was no love there, only pride, only anger. She asked, "What's wrong, my husband?" But he said nothing. For days, he ignored her. Mama Akena watched in shock as her son grew colder by the hour. Then one morning, under the mango tree where they once shared laughter and dreams, Olamo stood before Zulena and said the words that broke her world into pieces. "You are dismissed." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no goodbye. Zulena dropped to her knees, tears falling like the first rain of the season. She begged for understanding. She begged to know why, but Olamo turned away. His heart, now caged by lust and poisoned by Adiza's lies, could no longer hear the voice of love. And so, with those 3 words, Olamo walked away from the woman who gave him everything, and into the arms of a woman who would soon teach him the true price of betrayal. Destiny was watching, and it never forgets. Zuena collapsed to the ground, unable to stand, as Olamo's cruel words echoed in her ears. Her heart pounded with confusion, pain, and disbelief. Her eyes, once full of life and love, were now drowned in tears. She wept like a mother who had lost her only child, her cries soft at first, then heavy and sharp, breaking the morning silence in Nguta like thunder over dry land. Her hands clutched the soil beneath her, as if begging the earth to hold her together. Mama Akeni stood nearby, her arms folded with pride and her lips stretched into a cruel smile. "Finally," she hissed, her voice thick with spite. "My son is free from this village witch." She didn't even hide her joy. She clapped her hands as if celebrating a festival, as if Zulena's heartbreak was a victory. The same Zulena who once fed her, bathed her during her sickness, and stayed behind to care for her when Olamo left. And then it happened. 2 men were called from the village square. They were ordered to throw Zulena out, like she was nothing but a worn-out mat. She had no time to gather her things, no time to say goodbye to the little home she built with love. They dragged her from the house, her wrapper barely covering her body, her eyes wide with fear and shame. In one hand, she held a small bag that contained the last pieces of her dignity, a few clothes, a comb, and a faded picture of her wedding day. The villagers gathered outside their homes, watching in stunned silence. No one spoke, no one stepped forward, not because they didn't feel her pain, but because in Nguta, when a man says a woman is dismissed, her fate is sealed. To interfere was to question the laws of the land, and no one dared to challenge tradition. Children clung to their mothers. Old women turned away, tears in their eyes. A few young girls whispered to each other, "She was such a good wife. Why did he do this?" But they whispered only when sure no one else could hear. Zulena stood at the edge of the compound, barefoot and broken. She turned once to look at the home she built with love, hoping for even a flicker of remorse in Olamo's eyes, but he didn't look back. He closed the door and left her standing in the dust. But the winds of Nguta were stirring, the rivers whispered of injustice, the mountains had seen her tears, and the gods were watching, and in their silence they were preparing something that would remind the world, when a heart that gives is broken without cause, destiny does not sleep. Zulena walked for days without knowing where she was going. Her feet bled on sharp stones. The sun beat down on her back during the day, and the cold bit her skin at night. She had no food, no water, only the pain in her chest and the question in her heart. Why? She found shelter under trees, spoke to the moon like an old friend, and cried until her voice cracked. Even in her loneliness, she held on to her dignity. She begged for nothing. She complained to no one. Her soul had been shattered, but her spirit, somehow, refused to break. Then one morning, as the fog lifted from the fields of Omwaki, Zulena stumbled upon a small wooden shop with herbs hanging outside like green jewels. A kind widow named Ayoza noticed her fragile frame and empty eyes. Without asking questions, Ayoza took her in, fed her warm broth, and gave her a place to sleep. For the first time in weeks, Zulena slept without fear. Days turned into weeks. Ayoza saw a quiet strength in Zulena and offered her a chance to work in the herb shop. Zulena agreed, and under Ayoza's guidance, she began to learn the ways of roots and leaves. She learned which bark calmed a crying child, which oil soothed aching joints, and which teas brought sleep to restless minds. Her hands, once used to kneading dough and sweeping floors, became hands that brought relief and comfort. Word began to spread. At first, it was just village women with sore backs, or children with fever. Then, travelers from neighboring villages came, asking for the quiet healer with gentle eyes. She never shouted her worth. She never bragged, but her skills spoke louder than any trumpet. Zulena transformed, not in wealth or power, but in wisdom and grace. Her face grew calm like a still river, her steps firm like a mountain path. Yet behind her smile she carried memories like silent stones. She never spoke of Olamo, never cursed his name, but sometimes, at night, when the shop was closed and the stars blinked above, she would sit by the fire, holding a leaf between her fingers, remembering the woman she used to be, and the man who burned her without warning. She did not seek revenge. She did not chase after the past, but deep inside her, something was being born, something stronger than pain, more powerful than anger. Destiny was still writing her story, and the pen had only just begun. The morning was like any other in Omwaki, the scent of fresh herbs in the air, the soft chatter of early risers, and Zuena sweeping the front of the herb shop with quiet focus. She had no idea that fate was about to knock at her door, wearing polished shoes and speaking the language of power. A convoy arrived, stirring dust and curiosity in the village. Word spread quickly. A big government project was coming, and the man leading it was none other than Chief Mutari, one of the most respected officials from the capital. He came with guards, assistants, and pride, but behind his strong presence was a secret pain. Chief Mutari had been battling a strange illness for years. His sleep was haunted, his strength fading. He had consulted doctors, flown overseas, but nothing worked. When he heard whispers of a gifted herbalist in Omwaki, he came more out of desperation than belief. Zuena stood before him with calm eyes and steady hands. She didn't bow too low or try to impress. She simply listened to his symptoms, observed him carefully, and went to work. She brewed a bitter tea, mixed oils, chanted softly as she worked, not magic, but the deep wisdom of her ancestors. Within days, Chief Mutari felt a change. He slept like a baby for the first time in years. The pain in his chest eased. His breath grew lighter. He returned daily for her treatment, and with each visit, he saw not just healing in her hands, but peace in her presence. She never spoke of her past, never asked for reward. Her humility touched him more than her healing. On the 7th day, as he left her small hut with health restored and heart softened, he made a decision that shocked everyone, even Zuena. He summoned the entire village, stood beside her humble shop, and in front of the elders and villagers, he declared Zuena the chief herbalist of Omwaki province. She would be given land to build her own healing center, a monthly salary fit for royalty, and the respect that few women in her position had ever received. The crowd erupted in joy. Ayoza wept. Zuena, however, simply bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you." She accepted the honor, not with pride, but with grace. She expanded her work, trained young women, and opened her doors to anyone in need. Her name, once whispered with pity, now echoed with honor. Zuena had risen, but unlike many who rise and forget where they came from, she walked gently, carrying her pain like a lantern, lighting the path for others. Destiny had turned, and this time it bowed in her favor. Olamo's life was a slow, painful unraveling. It began with Adiza, the woman who had seduced him with promises of a life far beyond the village. She had lured him in with her charms, made him believe she was everything he needed, a sophisticated partner for his new life. But just like a thief in the night, Adiza took all of Olamo's money and disappeared, running off with another man. The riches he thought he had gained from his city job slipped through his fingers, leaving him penniless and heartbroken. It wasn't long before his dark secrets came to light. A scandal erupted, one that revealed his corruption and misuse of power while in the city. The village pride he once held had now turned to shame. Olamo's job was ripped from him, and the life he had built in the city collapsed in an instant. His name became a whispered curse, a reminder of ambition gone wrong, but the worst was yet to come. His mother, Mama Ikeni, who had once clapped with glee at the sight of Zulena's pain, fell ill. In her last days, she was bitter and angry, unable to forgive the choices she had made, especially the way she had treated her daughter-in-law. She passed away alone, with no one to mourn her but the walls of her cold house. Olamo, already drowning in regret, found himself standing at her graveside, a man broken not just by circumstance, but by his own heart's failures. With no family left, no friends to call on, and no home to return to, Olamo found himself in a state of utter despair. His pride, his power, all turned to dust. The villagers who had once admired him now turned their backs, refusing to even acknowledge his presence. His neighbors, once his followers, now shut their doors when they saw him coming. Soon, Olamo fell ill, the same illness that had plagued Chief Mutari. His nights were restless, his body weak. He searched for answers in vain, visiting doctors, healers, and anyone who might offer him relief, but no one could help him. The same sickness that had stolen Mutari's strength now ravaged him, leaving him hopeless and desperate. In his suffering, Olamo began to hear whispers, hushed voices telling tales of a woman in Omwaki, a healer who could cure what seemed incurable. It was the name he had never thought to speak, the one he had so carelessly thrown away. Zuena, the woman he had discarded without a second thought. With nothing left to lose, Olamo set out, desperate to find her. He traveled to Omwaki, a shadow of the man he once was, hoping that the same hands he had betrayed might now save him. Little did he know, the woman he sought had become a force greater than he could have ever imagined. The tables had turned, and Zulena's power was no longer something he could ignore. Olamo arrived in Omwaki, barely able to stand, his body weak and trembling from illness. His once strong frame was now a mere shadow of the man he used to be. The villagers who saw him were skeptical, whispering among themselves as they led him to the place he had never thought he'd return to, Zulena's herbal palace. His heart pounded as he walked, each step heavier than the last, the weight of regret pressing down on him like a storm cloud. When he entered, the room was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was filled with the sweet scent of herbs and fresh flowers, with walls adorned in green, gold, and royal splendor. In the center stood Zulena. She was radiant, dressed in a robe of royal green, the color of life itself. Her once simple hands now held a golden staff, a symbol of her power and status. Attendants moved gracefully around her, serving her as if she were a queen, and in this moment, she was. The woman who had once been abandoned, cast out, and broken, was now the epitome of grace and strength. Olamo's breath caught in his throat. The woman he had discarded, the one he had turned away from without a second thought, now stood before him in a way he could never have imagined. His eyes filled with tears, a mixture of sorrow and shame. Without thinking, he dropped to his knees before her, the weight of his guilt crashing down on him. His voice cracked as he pleaded, "Forgive me, please, help me." But Zulena did not react with anger, the kind he had expected. She didn't raise her voice or scold him for his cruelty. Instead, she looked at him with a sadness he had never seen in her eyes before, a pity born from understanding, not resentment. "You didn't just divorce me, Olamo," she said, her voice calm and steady. "You divorced your own blessing." Her words hit him like a slap, and for the first time, Olamo saw the truth of what he had done. It wasn't just Zulena he had rejected. It was everything she represented, the love, the strength, the purity of spirit. He had abandoned all of it for a fleeting illusion. In that moment, the truth rang clear. He had let go of his own fortune for the sake of ego and vanity. Olamo sat under the old baobab tree just outside Zulena's herbal palace, his back hunched, his clothes soaked in sweat and dust, and his body shaking from fever. But none of it hurt more than the pain in his heart. He coughed, weak and desperate, whispering her name like a fading prayer. "Zulena, Zulena," he called, over and over again, hoping, just hoping that she would come out one more time, that maybe she'd have mercy, that maybe her heart, the same one he once broke, would soften just enough to save him. But the palace gates never opened again. Inside, Zulena continued her work, surrounded by people who honored her wisdom and kindness. She had already given Olamo what he truly needed, not healing, but the truth. And that truth, bitter as it was, had to be swallowed without her help. Zulena had moved on. She had grown beyond the girl who begged for love. Now she was a woman who chose peace over pity, dignity over bitterness. Villagers from Omwaki and beyond passed by the broken man under the tree. They knew who he was, the man who once shined in expensive clothes, who had walked tall with pride and looked down on the woman who had given him everything. And now he sat like a beggar, not just for medicine, but for forgiveness that would never come. Children would ask, "Who is that man?" And their mothers would answer with quiet voices, "That is Olamo, the man who threw away a treasure thinking it was dust. Now he begs at the feet of gold he once stepped on." The story spread across Nguta like fire. People told it over evening fires and at village gatherings. They spoke of Zulena, the girl with nothing who became everything, and Olamo, the man with everything who ended with nothing. The tale became a lesson, a warning. It reminded everyone that the one you ignore today, the one you see as weak or unworthy, might be the very one who holds your future in their hands. And once lost, some blessings never return. So Olamo remained under that tree, coughing, crying, and shrinking with each passing day. His voice grew weaker, his whispers turned into silence. But Zulena never came back, because some lessons are meant to be learned not through words, but through pain. And now in Nguta, they say, never let pride cloud your eyes. Never forget the hands that fed you when you were hungry, the heart that loved you when you had nothing. For one day, the same person you rejected might be the only one who can save you, but by then, it may be too late. If this story touched your heart, if Zulena's pain felt like someone you know, If Olamo's regret reminded you of a mistake from the past, then let this be more than just a story. Let it be a mirror. Never take for granted the one who stands beside you in your darkest hour. Never trade loyalty for beauty or love for lust. Because sometimes, when you walk away from someone who truly cares, you may be walking away from your own destiny. Zuena's strength, her grace, her rise from the ashes. It's a reminder that no matter how much life breaks you, you can rebuild. But Olamo's fall is a warning. Please don't wait until it's too late to appreciate those who silently sacrifice for you. If this story moved you, if it brought tears to your eyes or made you reflect on life, then please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful African life stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and remember, never let ego cost you someone priceless.